If for whatever reason you've only just found us and are wondering what this is all about, we have ridden our trusty Honda Crosstourer around the entire coastline of England and Wales. You join us on what I'm pretty confident will be the penultimate episode. I know we've been saying we're nearly there for a while, but we really are now, sadly. In this episode, we're going to take you around the coastline of Clevedon and reveal our personal association with this delightful town. In the last episode, we had a lot to say about Portishead. In contrast, Clevedon's history is more sedate. Perhaps a welcome retreat after all the information in the last 3 episodes, Jared? With the exception of a few tucked-away cottages, the present town dates from the early Victorian period and the coming of the railway in 1847.
Unfortunately for Clevedon, it was a branch and not the main line, and was yet another victim of the Beeching Axe in 1966.
I think we know all about the Beeching Axe by now, Jared. Over the years, Clevedon slowly expanded, and it has very defined areas that reflect the eras. Unlike Portishead, there's been very little to regenerate. Organic growth has layered the generations neatly alongside each other and continues to do so. That said, most locals acknowledge an upper and lower Clevedon in both geographical and social elevation.
What Esther means is there's a posh half and, shall we say, everyone else. In our little tour around the coast, you'll only get to see one side of the town. See if you can guess which it is.
Coming down to Clevedon seafront. On one end is the Clevedon Pier, restored by the community after raising loads of money. That's the entrance to the pier.
Clevedon is perhaps most famous for its pier. Until the Severn Tunnel was opened in 1886, Brunel's Great Western Railway line from London to South Wales took the Great Way round via Swindon and Gloucester. Clevedon's position offered the exciting possibility of a faster route to South Wales by steamer from a pier. A partly constructed pier had been destroyed by high winds and heavy seas in November 1837 and abandoned. The proposed rail link provided fresh enthusiasm and of course the finance to resurrect the idea, and in July 1867 work began. The slender ironwork design provided minimum resistance to the wind and waves. It was a simple marriage of beauty, utility and economy. In an interesting twist, the iron components were sourced from large quantities of Brunel's discarded broad gauge rails. It was not only of the highest quality, but already formed into the beams that would provide the main structure. A toll house with accommodation for the piermaster completed the project at a cost of £10,000, and on Easter Monday, the 29th of March 1869, it was officially opened. The opening day was a great success, attracting thousands of people. For 20 years, Clevedon Pier provided a new, fast route over to South Wales. However, the opening of the Severn Railway Tunnel marked the beginning of the end. In 1891, the Clevedon Pier Company handed the pier over to Clevedon Council. The council invested in a new pierhead and 2 Japanese-style pagoda shelters were added. This worked out well because of the interest in Bristol Channel excursions on small ships, particularly paddle steamers, operated by P&A Campbell's White Funnel fleet. On a typical summer day in the 1930s, as many as 5 departures were recorded. A round trip covering Weston, Barry, Lynmouth and Ilfracombe was a popular excursion. Similar trips taking in Cardiff and Penarth catered for Welsh travellers. There were also Channel cruises and short trips to Portishead and Bristol. In the 50s and 60s, the pier embraced the era with a dance hall and jukebox. Eventually, the novelty of Bristol Channel cruises and rock and roll wore off, and the pier went into gradual decline. On Friday the 16th of October 1970, disaster struck. While it was being assessed for insurance purposes, a substantial section collapsed into the sea. For years it was not only an eyesore, but a liability to shipping. In 1979, campaigners failed to convince the council to save it, and they voted to demolish the pier. The decision caused consternation, and a public inquiry prevented the demolition from going ahead. The Clevedon Pier Preservation Trust eventually took control of the structure, and fundraising and the long road to restoration began. On the 25th of May 1998, 129 years after the first, the pier had its second grand opening. Perhaps Clevedon's most famous local, 3-time World Outdoor Bowls champion, David Bryant, performed the ceremony. The pier's status as an icon of national importance was acknowledged by the awarding of Grade 1 listed status in 2001. It is the only Grade 1 listed pier in England intact.
They've turned the seafront into a one-way system since we were here last. So we'll go down Copse Road, which is just behind, which actually is one of the most wonderful streets in Clevedon. It's got a pub, front room pub, community bookshop, which is awesome, and these absolutely delightful old terraces on the left, well, and the right. It's a really lovely street. So at this end we have the famous Clevedon Marine Lake, which that's what all those people are enjoying, paddle boarding and little boats. So the tide comes in and the lake has a refresh. We have some very dedicated early morning Marine Lake seawater swimmers. 5:30 in the morning attending there. Sunny Sunday afternoon, everybody is out. I think they're all enjoying Marine Lake now it's been so lovingly restored.
As the sun sets on our last day and we pull in for the final fuel stop, let's remind ourselves of how far we've come. As you probably know, we didn't ride around the coast in one go, but split it into 7 separate trips to work around our busy lives. We're not retired quite yet. We should have kept a better riding log and recorded the data as we went along, but instead we've had to trawl through Google Timeline, which is not an entirely accurate log of the trip. According to Google, we've travelled a total of 5,609 miles. If I take away the return journeys and leave just the coast bits, it's 3,244 miles. Google Timeline has jumped some sections, and I think we've done at least 3,500 coast miles. If you think that seems like a lot, then check out our explanation of the coastline paradox in episode 40. We did it in 7 legs, so there were 6 return journeys, and it took us 39 days in total. This includes the return journeys and 2 days where we stopped over for a night. So what's the personal connection, I hear you say? Well, Esther and I met in Clevedon while I was working at Clevedon Motorcycles. One day she came into the shop when her Honda Melody broke down, and the rest, as they say, is history. Our first house was also in Clevedon, needless to say in the part where everyone else lived. This town has nothing but good memories for us. Clevedon Motorcycles has changed hands a few times, but it's still going strong. It moved out of the premises on Old Street some years ago, and the building has been converted to housing. I worked here for 5 years when it was run by Mike Vanderwalls. Although perhaps the man most associated with Clevedon Motorcycles is Nigel White, the mechanic. He made quite an impression. The dynamic between him and Mike meant there was never a dull moment for me. Thanks guys for making my time such a pleasant memory. Probably the best place I ever worked. I left the motorcycle industry and we moved to Portishead because Esther and I both worked in Bristol. A few years ago we moved to Weston-super-Mare, the town where I was born. Join us next time on our last episode as we finally return home.